The New York Rangers suffer the most blah loss of all time, 2-1 to the Winnipeg Jets. And has anyone seen Alexis Lafreniere?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1266 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, yeah, another loss, 2-1 to the Jets. And like I said just a second ago in the intro, this was just such a blah loss for the New York Rangers. What I mean by that is there was never really a time in this game where you could get all that excited, feel all that good about the Rangers' prospects of winning, even though they never trailed by more than a goal, even though they had the game tied for a little while in the first period there. And it's not a game where you can look at this player over here or that player over there and say, oh man, this guy was terrible. That guy was really bad. This guy needs to step up. It was just collectively, nobody was really all that good. I don't think anybody was necessarily all that terrible either. There were guys that certainly were not as noticeable as you'd like them to be. And we'll get to that more in just a little bit here, looking at you, Alexis Lafreniere. But I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those games where it unfolded the exact way that you kind of thought that it would. Another game where it was Igor Shesterkin keeping them in the mix, at least for the majority of it, and they only lose by one goal. More so having to do with Igor Shesterkin than probably anything else, why this game didn't get a little bit more out of hand. You had an ex-Rangers scoring a goal. You had the Rangers taking all kinds of penalties like they've been doing recently, and just nobody stepping up, nobody taking the bull by the horns and leading the way for this Ranger team. It's funny, Johnny Lazarus, who was a recent guest on Locked On New York Rangers, and we got to have Johnny back sometime down the road for sure, but he tweeted out before this game, I don't have the exact tweet in front of me, but it was basically something like, I can't really get a feeling about this game. And man, was that on the nose. I had the exact same feeling going into this before the puck even dropped. And then the game followed suit. Like I said, everything was just very blah about this Ranger matchup with the Jets. And I don't know, maybe the fact that it was starting a little bit later, 8 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock. Maybe it's the fact that as fans of the Rangers, we're all still reeling from what happened over the weekend. The Rangers had a golden opportunity, and everything would be completely 180 degrees in the other direction if the Rangers had taken care of their business over the weekend, which obviously they did not. So we're still reeling from those two losses to the Senators and the Jackets, the two teams that they're trying to chase down for a playoff spot. Maybe it's the fact that it's Rangers Jets and there's not really a whole lot of history there. I mean, a couple of trades over the years, sure, but not really a whole lot besides that. It's there just wasn't a whole lot to get excited about going into this game. There was no real reason going into this game or during this game to believe that the Rangers were going to go in there against Winnipeg, against the Jets, against this team with more points than any other team in the NHL and get the win. There was just no real reason to feel that way. And, that blah feeling, like I said, you felt it going in, or at least I did, and I think a couple of others did as well. And it stayed right there after the puck dropped as well. You've got Vladislav Namestnikov scoring 5 minutes into the action. I tweeted out, obviously kidding, but I said that Namestnikov has more goals in this game than he did during his entire Ranger tenure. That's not 100% accurate, but it feels that way, right? And the fact that they, again, get burned by another former player is just par for the course for this team. It's another early goal. This occurred about 5 minutes into the game. Not as early as usual, but the Rangers still do concede the first goal of the game. They do so relatively early in the first period. And you watch this goal, and it's just everything wrong with the Rangers and the way that they've defended this season. I don't know what was going on by really any of the 6 Rangers on the ice on this play. You've got the Jets going over the Ranger blue line. It's 3-on-5. The Rangers have all 5 guys back in the D zone, or at least in the general vicinity of the D zone. And the Jets just go right in and score. It was really more like 2-on-5 because only 2 Jets ended up touching the puck here. But, Susie and Jones are out there. They both looked awful on this play. Susie's reaching for the puck and basically falling all over himself while the Jets are rushing into the zone. Jones wasn't able to create any resistance. You've got Panarin and Carrick and Lafreniere out there. They don't get back into the play, and it leads to a goal that never should have happened. And on top of that, Igor Shesterkin, he overplayed the puck before it got to Nemestikov. I'm trying to remember who it was on the Jets that had the puck initially on this play. It escapes me, but whoever it was, Igor goes over like way out of his crease, moving to his right, and basically just took himself out of the play. Now, again, he got zero help on this play, but they showed a replay of this with that overhead camera that they like that's directly above the net. It's a great shot. But when you watch this replay, when this goal was scored, Igor was not even in the camera. I think like the back end of his stick might have still been visible, but you would have thought the Rangers had their goalie pulled. That's how far out of his net he came to basically just overplay this puck and leave Nemestikov all by himself on the doorstep. And to be fair, he probably thought that one of his 5 teammates was going to attempt to play some kind of defense on this play, which they did not, or at the very least did so incredibly poorly, and it leads to a goal. And, again, you can't keep getting off to these bad starts, especially against good teams, especially on the road. And this is a game where, as it turns out, goals were at a premium. Final score was 2-1. You let them have this one. You gave it right to them. Par for the course for the New York Rangers, though. As far as other reasons why this had such a blah feeling to it, the Rangers continuing to take penalties. I don't know exactly when this started. The last handful of games for sure. I mean, they've lost 4 straight games. But the last couple of games here, the Rangers are taking just a boatload of penalties. A lot of them are completely unnecessary. And they end up giving a very dangerous Jets team 4 different power play opportunities in this game. And the Jets went 1 for 4. They scored the game-winning goal while the Rangers were shorthanded after a penalty. Now, to be 100% fair here, that was the power play where there was a penalty called on Matt Rempe, and that penalty was absolute garbage. Rempe was near the Jets' net, gets shoved backward into Hellebuck, falls down, makes contact with him, and basically gets a 2-minute penalty for one of a couple of different things. It was either 2 minutes for being Matt Rempe, 2 minutes for being bigger than your opponent, 2 minutes for reputation, or what I chose to go with on Twitter, 2 minutes for being shoved into the goalie. There's nothing else that should have been called on this play. Laviolette was furious. He had every right to be. And, of course, that leads to the game-winning goal for the Jets. And while we're on that subject, bit of a bad break there for the Rangers, right? And they had a couple other bad breaks in this game. They hit the post twice. But you watch the way this Ranger team has played over the last handful of games here, and really for the entire season. Ask yourself this question and be honest with yourself. Have the Rangers done anything to deserve any breaks? Probably not. So that's why I can't go crazy about it. I mean, I didn't like that penalty at all, but I mean, whatever, man. Like the Rangers, they don't deserve any better than what they got in this game as far as puck luck is concerned and this bad call that went against Matt Rempe here. And then another thing that really gave this game a blah feeling to me as well, and some of you guys were pointing this out on social media, is that the first period intermission report that Vincent Trocheck did. Man, this guy looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world doing anything else in the world. And I know some people are going to say, it doesn't matter. Talk is cheap anyway. You're talking with the media. Sometimes players just don't feel like doing it. Okay, fine. But, I mean, just the amount of attitude and the amount of snark that he gave to John Giannone of all people, who I think has been as fair and as objective and as positive as probably anybody who covers this team can possibly be about the Rangers this season. The one in the MSG studio who gets on the Rangers case probably more than anybody else, I would say, is probably Steve Valiquette. Joe Micheletti's making some headway there. He's been more critical of them this season than I've heard him in other seasons, but Valiquette's the one that when they're bad, he'll straight up call them out on it. So maybe that's part of the reason why Trocheck didn't want to do the interview. Maybe he feels like, it's a hive mind in there, and if one of them feels that way, they all feel that way. But you'll forgive us, Vinny, for calling you guys out when you're not playing well. I mean, we have to be fair and we have to be objective. Believe me, I want nothing more. And obviously, Trocheck, I doubt he's ever watched this show, but I want nothing more than to come on here and talk about how awesome everything is and how great the Rangers are doing and how this guy is exceeding expectations. But that's just not reality this season. We're 65 games into the season and this entire team is underachieved. So, Trocheck, kind of throwing shade and giving at least some attitude. And it's possible that I'm overanalyzing this. It's possible that we as Ranger fans are all overanalyzing this. But this is the guy that we all feel is the front runner to be the next captain. And he just looked absolutely miserable doing this interview. He just felt like he didn't want to be there. And so that gave this game a blah feeling too. You watch this, and this is the guy that supposedly has stepped up and is supposedly, maybe the front runner to be the next Ranger captain. And this is his attitude. This is his demeanor after a period that was not great, but it was 1-1. I mean, it wasn't a complete disaster, right? Which is about as much as you can hope for lately. I don't know. I mean, to me, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. You guys let me know what you think about that too, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of differing opinions on this. Some people are going to say, I don't care how players talk to the media. Others are going to probably be on board with me and say, yeah, I don't think that was a good look. I'm curious, very curious to hear how you guys feel about that one for sure. So definitely leave it in the YouTube comment section and feel free to share your opinion. But anyway, we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I want to shift our attention to Alexis Lafreniere, the ghost of Alexis Lafreniere. We will talk about that in just a second. All right, we just want to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by our very good friends at Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. We've all been in that spot where we need to hire somebody like pretty much yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person can be a big setback. That's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's very easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off for your first year. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. We got to give a big shout out to the everydayers, as always, for continuing to endure this brand of hockey that we've all been subjected to this season from our beloved Blue Shirts. For the everydayers, though, definitely stick around. The fun rolls on here. The Rangers are going to be back in action on Thursday on the road against the Minnesota Wild. I mean, do we even bother calling it a must-win at this point? I think you have to have that mentality that every game is a must-win, but the Rangers haven't been doing much winning recently. But the more they lose, the more the next game becomes a must-win. So sure, why not? The next game is a must-win. But for right now, to continue breaking down not just this game, but kind of a whole bunch of games, if we're being honest here, let's turn our attention to Alexis Lafreniere. I've been waiting to do this. I've been wanting to do a segment on Alexis Lafreniere and his regression and trying to figure out what in the world is happening there. And did he really just put his feet up after he signed that contract? But I've kind of been putting it off because I feel like it's actually somewhat difficult to critique him right now because that's how unnoticeable, that's how invisible, that's how much of a non-factor this guy has become on a night in and night out basis. And anybody that's watched this team, I don't know how you can really see otherwise. And for me, hosting this podcast, how do you critique a player that you literally cannot find on the rink, that literally never does anything on the rink? That's what it feels like recently. And what made me really want to get to it today is that Joe Micheletti talked about him earlier. He's been a little bit more critical of the Rangers this year than we've seen in other years for sure. But he basically called out Lafreniere kind of near the start of this game. I would say probably the first 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it was there. And basically just said that they need more out of this guy. They need more production, and he's absolutely right. Now, I know there was going to be a couple of people that point out the fact that coming into this game, Lafreniere does have 4 assists in his last 5 games. So it's something, baby steps, right? That's all well and good. The points are nice. You'll take them. But does anybody watch Lafreniere, even over those 5 games where he had 4 assists, and think like, man, this guy is really out there making a difference. He's really moving the needle. He's leading the way for the Rangers. He's giving everything he's got on every shift. I don't see how you can watch him play recently and feel like that's the case. You can make that case about some other players on the Rangers. I think the 4th line, talked about them. They've played great. I tweeted this out last night. I'm not trying to be funny when I say this. I'm not trying to exaggerate to make the point when I say this. Matt Rempe has been one of the best Ranger players over the last 3 games. And I'm not just saying that because, like, well, everybody else has been so bad. He's actually played well. And a lot of you guys kind of chimed in on that comment, mentioning that, this guy actually hustles. He's fighting for the puck behind the net. He's very strong behind the goal line on both sides of the rink. I think that's really stood out recently. And he's doing everything he can, playing that 4th line role to a T. So, mini tangent over, though. We'll go back to Lafreniere here. Look at the season that he's having here and consider that, he's played most of the season with Panarin. He's with the same line for most of the season that was so electric, so unstoppable last year. And those guys, as much as the Rangers have struggled, Panarin's been producing offensively recently. So too is Trocheck to a lesser extent. But you look at Lafreniere, 65 games, despite everything that I just said, 65 games, 14 goals, 22 assists. So just 36 points in 65 games. He's also a minus 17. Second worst on the team, only to Mika Zibanejad. And Mika's played considerably better recently. Not perfect, but better. That'll give you an idea of where he was to start the season. That he's still, as far down on the plus minus as he is. But Lafreniere is right there with him. Another stat that kind of jumped out. And this is a stat that I think people certainly have some mixed feelings. And clearly it's not foolproof. But when it changes this much from one season to the next, I think it certainly bears talking about. Last season, Alexis Lafreniere had 45 takeaways against 27 giveaways. This season, 21 takeaways against 38 giveaways. So already more giveaways by a long shot with a lot of games to go here. 18, whatever we're down to. I think 17. If I'm not mistaken, they played 65 games, which would give you 17 to go. And he's already got more giveaways by a lot. He's not going to get near as many takeaways. So it's just another example of him just not being efficient. But you just watch him play. This guy never has the puck anymore. If he does have the puck, he gets knocked off of it about a half second later. There were plays near the end of this game. The Rangers are still down 2-1. They've still got a chance. It doesn't really have a good feeling to it because there's just no real reason to believe that the Rangers are going to come back and win this game. The Jets are a far better team. They defend very well. And in the rare instance that maybe you do crack the Jets' defensive code, now you got to get one past Connor Hellebuck, who's playing like we all wish that Igor Shesterkin had played this season. So good luck. And again, it's not all on Lafreniere because there's a lot of players not producing, not living up to the back of their hockey cards. Call it whatever you want to call it. You guys have watched this team. There are players up and down this roster that have fallen miles short of expectations. But there's a sequence late in this game where the Jets make a rare mistake. They're trying to hold the puck in the Ranger zone. The defenseman basically kind of blew a tire, and the Rangers go the other way. They've got a rush. They've got speed. They've got numbers. They're going the other way into the Jets zone. And nobody really looked good on this sequence. It was the, Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere line out there. Joe even pointed out that they never ended up getting a shot away. But the puck went to Lafreniere behind the net, and he kind of just went with a hope play, just kind of play the puck in front of the net, which isn't a terrible idea, but it felt like it was just kind of a pass to no one, and the Jets get control of it, and the threat is over. So that wasn't good. And then there was a situation where, and this goes back to what I was talking about a second ago, but there's about 3:30 to go. Lafreniere's got the puck behind the net. He's got a little bit of time and space, but the Jets close quickly, and Nemestikov almost effortlessly knocks Lafreniere off the puck. And just like that, possession is lost, the threat is gone, and the Rangers aren't going to score. And again, just examples. I don't want to pin everything on one player, but I've kind of been, when you think about it, I've been cutting Lafreniere a break recently because I mentioned earlier that I've been looking to get to this and just haven't found an episode to fit it into and wanted more to talk about because, again, when he's playing such a nondescript game, it makes it more difficult to break everything down. The other thing that I'll throw out there as far as Lafreniere and his obvious dip in play, and I'm not making an excuse here, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I do wonder, with Lafreniere, as well as the other young players on this team, Is this a trickle-down effect? Is what we're seeing from guys like Lafreniere, whose production has fallen off a cliff, from guys like Will Cooley, who does not look anything like the player that we saw at the start of this season. He was out there scoring goals, getting in everybody's face, hitting people. Now he's a turnover machine. He's been turning over the puck a lot in recent games. Actually got him bumped down, I think, for just one shift. But from the second line to the third line in this game, he hasn't played nearly as well. And now you've got, Berard and Offman that are called up. Berard's a healthy scratch every game. But the bottom line, the guys that were supposed to be leading the way for this team basically quit for a good chunk of the season. And I look at, we can't blame Trouba by this point. He's been gone for too long, but he was the captain. He wasn't doing much leading while he was here, but he's gone, and it leaves it down to the alternates that remain. Kreider, Mika, Fox, Panarin. And those guys basically just kind of threw in the towel for a good chunk of the season, the 4-15 stretch that happened earlier this year. So did Lafreniere follow suit? Did Will Cooley sort of follow suit? Did any of the other young players on the New York Rangers follow suit? When they saw these guys not giving the college try, and when they saw that there's nobody really to lead this team and nobody really to hold this team accountable, did that even subconsciously affect these players and cause they themselves to also see a dip in play? Because if you remember for a while there, when the Rangers went through that brutal stretch, a lot of the younger players were still giving effort and still giving you some good shifts, while the veteran players, the supposed leaders, went in the tank. And now it feels like, again, it's just been that trickle-down effect. It's infected the entire room, and nobody is willing to go out there. Lafreniere, the other young players, the veteran players, willing to go out there and play the kind of hockey that you need to play to be successful in this league. So, again, you still have to be your own best leader if you're Alexis Lafreniere or any of these other young players. But it's hard not to notice that, the veteran players gave up, and it seems like the younger players have, at least in a way, somewhat followed suit for the rest of the season here. And that also leads me to something else that I want to talk about: the contract extension signed by Alexis Lafreniere. 7-year extension signed on October 25th. Contract is worth $7.45 million per season. I don't remember what Lafreniere is making this year. I want to say it's around $2.4 million. Bottom line, big time raise. Big time financial security going forward. He signed this deal just 7 games into the season. So small sample size. Take it with a grain of salt. But 7 games into the season, Lafreniere had 4 goals and 3 assists. And if you want to go by the eye test, he was out there. He was all over the ice every single night, going to the tough parts of the rink, going to the high danger scoring opportunities and converting on his opportunities, skating like a madman, all the good stuff. His numbers after that: 58 games since that contract extension was signed, 10 goals, 19 assists, for a total of just 29 points, exactly a half point per game. This despite the fact that Lafreniere, at best in rare circumstances, has never left the top 6. He's been a top 6er pretty much the entire season. He spent the vast majority of the season with Trocheck and Panarin. That line set the world on fire last year. Panarin and Trocheck have been producing offensively recently. Lafreniere has not been. He's gotten not a ton of power play time, but more than he's ever gotten at any other point in his career. And he still is just in the tank as far as his offensive production is concerned. And the eye test isn't good either. You look at his back checking, that's been non-existent. Even on a team where, they clearly struggle with back checking, he stands out in a bad way in that area as well. So it has not been good for Alexis Lafreniere. I keep waiting for him to pick it up. But again, we're into the final portions of this season. We're at the very home stretch, and the Rangers are in a position where they need to be winning games. If you want to entertain any hope of them making the playoffs, these are must-win games. And you would think that would eventually, not just Lafreniere, but everybody, it would snap them out of it, kick them into high gear. And I guess it happened for a couple of games there. We saw back-to-back shutouts against the Islanders and the Predators. But where is that gone? It's nowhere to be found. And, Lafreniere, we kind of singled him out here. At a certain point, you have to, but it's really the whole team, if we're being honest. We're also going to talk about another Ranger who I know Ranger fans are just thrilled with this season. That's Chris Kreider, and the fact that it seems like he's kind of checking out. He had some quotes before this game that were, I thought, very eye-opening. It was really just one word, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting on which to bet. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode here by talking about some interesting comments, some eye-opening comments from Chris Kreider before this game happened. Basically, meeting with the media, questions going his way, and he was asked about what it was like, hearing his name in the trade rumor mill the entire season. Obviously, we know about the memo that Drury sent out early in the year with Trouba and Kreider, their names at the top of the list. And, he was asked about that whole experience and then ultimately not being traded before the deadline came and went. This is what Kreider had to say about it. I'm not privy to that information. I worry about what's in front of me. And right now it's Winnipeg. Happy to be here. Enjoyed my time here. And I'll continue to try to help this team win hockey games. So that was the word that I was talking about just a second ago. He enjoyed his time here. He's talking about the Rangers. This season is ongoing. In theory, they're still in the playoff chase because the East is so bad that nobody's going to run away with it these last couple of spots here. Although Ottawa's been on fire lately, so they might actually run away with one of the wild card spots. We'll see how it all plays out. But there's no world-beating team that you would think is going to create massive separation here between themselves and the rest of the field. We'll see. But the bottom line, Rangers are theoretically in a playoff chase here. He's under contract with this team for 2.5 more years, and he's talking about them in the past tense. Did he do that on purpose? Did he realize that he did it? Is it kind of like a middle finger at the front office for some of the moves that they've made and for floating his name in trade rumors to begin with? Only Chris Kreider can answer that question, but that was very, very eye-opening here. Somebody made a question on Twitter not too long ago because a lot of the big-time Matt Rempe fans will throw out the numbers that the Rangers have when he's in the lineup versus when he's not in the lineup. And the Rangers have a dramatically better record since Matt Rempe made his debut last year when he's in the lineup versus when he is not in the lineup. That is true. Don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but, that's a true statement. But somebody made a comment on Twitter that we should maybe take a look at the Rangers' record with Kreider in the lineup versus Kreider not in the lineup. And, oh, yeah, we're about to go there. Now, I haven't looked at the whole big body of work here, but I did take a quick look at what's happened in the 9 games that the Rangers have played after the Four Nations face-off because Kreider's been in and out of the lineup since then. So 9 games for the Rangers. 4 games Kreider has been in the lineup after the Four Nations face-off here. In those 4 games, the Rangers are 0-3-1, and they've been outscored 21-9. Kreider played in the 8-2 loss to the Buffalo Sabres. That's where he got hurt. He missed the next bunch of games, and then he's come back, and ever since he's been back into the lineup, the Rangers have gone 0-2-1. So 0-3-1, the 4 games that Kreider has been in the lineup after the Four Nations break. Now, what have they done when Kreider has not been in the lineup, when he was out with his injury here after the Four Nations? The Rangers have a record in those 5 games of 4-1. They have outscored their opponents 20-7 in those 5 games. That is an insane difference. Now, I'm going to point something out that I think we're probably all pretty much aware of. That doesn't all fall on Chris Kreider, right? It's not one player that's causing everything to massively swing this way and massively swing that way. There's other factors here. We know this Ranger team has been at best inconsistent the entire season, whether Kreider is in the lineup or not. So we got to be completely fair here and throw that out there. But this is a guy, again, longest tenured Ranger, decade and a half with the team, supposed to be one of the leaders, the guy that I think a lot of us were all hoping would really step up as kind of the de facto captain after Jacob Trouba got traded, and he hasn't done it. And the best thing you can say about this stretch, even if you want to write it off as Kreider's one player and there's other factors here as far as why the Rangers are winning and losing these games, the best thing you can say about Chris Kreider is that he certainly has not helped the Rangers by being back in the lineup. He certainly has not made a positive impact from being back in the lineup. And again, you're in the middle of a playoff chase where every game is so massive, and it's just an insane difference. I know it's only 9 games. 4 without Kreider in the lineup, 4 with Kreider in the lineup, 5 without Kreider in the lineup. But the difference in those games is just absolutely astronomical. I mean, you can't, again, let me do this goal differential one more time because I think we need to really let this sink in. 0-3-1 are the Rangers, while Kreider was in the lineup after the Four Nations, outscored 21-9. With Kreider not in the lineup, 4-1, outscoring opponents 20-7. That's just an astronomical difference, and I don't think it can be completely ignored, completely written off as coincidence. So I don't know, man. With Kreider, I'm just at the point where it's like, I can't believe it's going to end this way. Like, he's been here forever. Been to the Stanley Cup final with this team. Been to the Eastern Conference final, I think 5 times. All these deep playoff runs, all these big playoff moments. We are less than a year from what could have been, if the Rangers had won the Cup last year, what could have turned out to be an absolutely iconic performance by Chris Kreider. Game 6 against the Canes, the natural hat trick to lead them all the way back in the third period. Unbelievable storybook stuff. And now he looks like he can barely be bothered to put in effort in any given shift. And I don't think he's played terribly since he's been back, but it just feels like, again, he's kind of checked out. He kind of is acknowledging that this is the end, and you're just not going to see what you would want to see from somebody that's been on this team for so long, that was supposed to be basically the de facto captain after Jacob Trouba got traded, and whose team is in the middle of a playoff chase. You're just not going to get that from him. I don't think we can continue to hold out hope that we're going to. Not at this point, not after everything we've seen this season. So, yeah, that's kind of where things stand. It looks like a really rough ending, an anticlimactic ending, a sad ending, call it whatever you want to call it. It's not going to be a happy ending when Chris Kreider is ultimately a New York Ranger. It sounds like he's accepted what I think is going to happen, and that's that the Rangers are going to trade him before the start of next season. One more thing I want to throw out here real quick, and we'll talk about this in greater detail in the next episode. Right before I hit record, some breaking news in Rangerland. Jonathan Quick has re-signed with the team on a 1-year deal for $1.55 million. He gets a slight raise from the $1.275 million that he's making this year. Overall, I like this deal. I like that Jonathan Quick is coming back for one more season. We'll elaborate on this and talk about it in greater detail in the next episode. But yeah, we can call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, that is @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.